The purging of Sejanus had left Tiberius betrayed and broken, and the Princeps would now grow only ever more reclusive and suspicious, tucked away on his island of Capri. Rome and its Senate would now be racked by fear of reprisal, as they struggled to meet new challenges as Tiberius's tenure approached its close. Welcome to our episode on the final years of the reign of Tiberius, where we'll explore the end of the Treason trials and how the success of Augustus's institutions carried Rome through this tumultuous period to new leadership. Do you know why thousands of people on YouTube and Patreon support us financially? Because they get history you won't find anywhere else. We release 3 new exclusive videos every week. Plus, they get perks like early access to all videos, voting rights on upcoming series and videos, access to our private Discord, our production schedule, and much more. Right now, 250 exclusive episodes are waiting for members and patrons, including from our series on the Eastern Front of World War II, Spanish War of Succession, the Punic Wars, the Pacific War, the Iberian Reconquista, the Russian Revolution and Civil War, the North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, Sicilian Wars between the Greeks and Carthaginians, and many others. By joining, you're not only unlocking rare content, you're also supporting the stories you love. Your help allows us to keep producing 3 free videos per week while paying our team competitive salaries and growing the channel. Join via the links in the description, the pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. Thanks for making this possible. In the aftermath of Sejanus' execution, Tiberius felt his position and authority as Princeps had become less tenable, as his expectation of the Senate's role and the Senate's inability to function without his involvement had nearly brought Rome to a breaking point. The Senate had previously sworn an oath of loyalty to him as a political body. Still, in January of 32 CE, Tiberius had each individual senator swear their oath of loyalty to him personally, highlighting this lack of trust in Rome's governing institution. During this series of swearing of allegiances, senators returned the wealth of Sejanus to the personal treasury of the Princeps, from which it had largely originated, and condemned the memory of Livia Iulia in this display, with Togonius Gallus even proposing a bodyguard of esteemed senators to escort the Princeps in the chambers, which the Princeps politely declined. As charges against men like Cotta Messallinus and other consulars were dropped, it seemed calmer heads would prevail. However, many other senators who had levied accusations and associates in Sejanus' circle who had chosen not to follow him now found themselves at trial. Only a few would see themselves spared execution as informers, while multiple men of consular rank would be put to death for maestas. Moreover, many female relatives of the deceased, who could not be charged with conspiracy against the state, as they could not hold office, were executed for the tears they shed over the accused traitors. Even after issuing these draconian orders, Tiberius still expected the Senate and the budding bureaucracy to perform their duties, castigating them for failing to quell grain riots, and burdening them with the task of cracking down on violations of Caesar's usury laws, which their failure to address adequately had resulted in widespread economic woes. The year 33 opened with the introduction of Tiberius's remaining granddaughters to public life, as he considered marrying them off to influential families. Tiberius then asked permission to bring the new commander of the Praetorians, Macro, into the Senate chambers with him, along with a small guard of trusted tribunes and centurions, which the senators agreed to. Tiberius also stepped in to resolve the usury crisis by making available conditional loans to restore credit and lending. Once again, the Princeps returned to the Italian mainland to conduct these affairs, but did not come into the city of Rome, dashing the Senate's hopes. The rest of the year continued with the condemnation of senators and equites for either their relation to Sejanus and his conspiracy, or for accusing others of such pretenses. Many senators and Roman noblewomen anticipated these verdicts, committing suicide preemptively through self-starvation or other means. Among these suicides was Drusus, the son of Germanicus, followed shortly by Agrippina, whom Tiberius had despised for some time now. This was followed by Plancina's death, and then, strangely, the self-inflicted starvation and suicide of Tiberius's close friend, Marcus Coacius Nerva. The years 34 and 35 would be little different, as complicity with Sejanus was stretched to its limits to bring senators and equestrians to trial. Few were spared, and those who were had a great deal of power and support that Tiberius could not test. Lentulus Gaetulicus was untouchable, as he commanded one of the 2 Rhine armies, the other being under the control of his father-in-law. So the punishment was carried out against the former aedile Abdius Russo. even the former king of Armenia, Tigranes IV, found himself caught up in this tyrannical whirlwind and was condemned and executed in 36 CE, as trouble broke out along the eastern limes. When the Roman-appointed king of Armenia, Artaxius III, died in 34 CE, Artabanus, Shahanshah of the Parthians, seized the opportunity to elevate his own son, Arsaces, to the Armenian throne in 35 CE. Emboldened by his securing of the throne of Armenia, he sent envoys to Tiberius, demanding all of the treasure belonging to Vonones I, who had been received in exile during Germanicus's tenure in the province, boasting that he would invade Cappadocia if it were not returned to him. Within the Parthians' own court, however, many were displeased at the sudden hostility towards what they perceived as a member of the ruling family, as the House of Augustus had been the stewards of many members of the Parthian royal family. To that end, two Parthians, named Syneches and Abdus, sent an envoy to Tiberius, requesting that Phraates, the son of Phraates IV, be placed on the throne of Parthia. They argued that as Phraates was a member of the House of Arsaces and had been raised by the House of Augustus, whom they saw as an extension of the royal family, he would be seen as legitimate and accepted by the Parthian nobility. Tiberius, finding the plan attractive, hurried Phraates off to Syria in preparation for his installation, while Artabanus caught wind of the usurpation and had Abdus poisoned. Despite this setback, Tiberius and Syneches were able to proceed with a new candidate, a certain Tiridates. Employing his influence to settle an internal dispute in Caucasian Iberia, Tiberius persuaded kings Pharasmanes and Mithridates to launch a campaign into Armenia to seat Tiridates on the Parthian throne. Mithridates took to this task with great enthusiasm, bribing Arsaces' personal retainers to poison him and quickly capturing Artazata. Artabanus did not take this setback lying down and sent another of his sons, Orodes, into Armenia with a large army. Here, however, the Parthian prince found himself outnumbered, as Pharasmanes had arrived with additional help from the Caucasian Albani and friendly Sarmatians. Pharasmanes goaded Orodes repeatedly until he managed to provoke him to fight in single combat, in which Pharasmanes wounded Orodes. Believing him dead, the Parthian army routed, and the Iberians had taken Armenia for Tiberius with few losses. The year 36 CE began with Artabanus launching a campaign into Armenia. Yet, despite being heavily outnumbered by the invaders, the Iberians had gained extensive knowledge of the local terrain and were able to harass the Parthian army through this advantage. Vitellius, governor of Syria, then moved the Syrian legions across the Euphrates as a provocative move, which prompted Artabanus to withdraw from Armenia. With the majority of the Parthian court having been brought over to Tiridates' side by Syneches, Artabanus retreated to his base of power in northeast Iran, and Tiridates crossed into Parthia with a force of cavalry and the backing of the satrap Ornodaspes, Syneches, and his father Abdigaces. Advancing through the Greek cities of Anthemusius and Nicephorion, the Parthian cities of Halys and Artemita welcomed him with open arms, followed by Seleucia across the Tigris from the capital of Ctesiphon. There, Phraates and Hieron urged Tiridates to delay his coronation, but after crossing to Ctesiphon and having waited long enough, he had himself crowned by the powerful Suren family to general rejoicing. However, instead of setting out to administer the state, Tiridates wasted his time laying siege to one of Artabanus' fortresses, where he held a large treasury and numerous slaves, prompting Phraates and Hieron to turn back to Artabanus' side alongside their broader objection to the power of Abdigaces and Syneches. With renewed support in the capital, Artabanus returned with his forces and approached Seleucia rapidly, catching Tiridates completely unprepared. Tiridates' allies in the court attempted to persuade him to strike Artabanus quickly, while his army was tired from a forced march. Tiridates ignored their advice and instead followed the counsel of Abdigaces, who suggested they retreat to Upper Mesopotamia, where the Iberians and Romans could support them. As a result, most of the Armenian king's army defected over to Artabanus, and Tiridates fled to Syria. Tiberius recognized the ploy had failed. Nevertheless, most of his primary objectives had been achieved. Vitellius had secured a peace treaty with Artabanus to keep the Iberian Mithridates on the Armenian throne. At the same time, Artabanus sent his son to Rome as a hostage, and agreed to recognize Roman authority in Anatolia. However, Tiberius would not live to greet the Arsacid prince upon his arrival in Rome. In 37 CE, Tiberius had once again come within mere miles of Rome, but failed to cross the Pomerium into the city itself. Heading back to Capri, he fell ill at the city of Asturia, but recovered and continued south to Cacae, where he relapsed again. The Princeps made it to Misenum, where he rested in the villa of Lucullus. There he was assessed by his doctor, Charicles, a man Tiberius habitually avoided. In a grim prognosis, the doctor gave Tiberius 2 days to live. The accounts of Tiberius's death vary. The historians Tacitus and Cassius Dio both recall a tale that Tiberius fell into a coma and was presumed dead, only to reawaken and request food, while Gaius Caesar, grandson of Germanicus, was receiving his congratulations. Upon his flatterers fleeing the scene in embarrassment, Macro astutely ordered Tiberius smothered with either his own bedclothes or a pillow, securing Gaius's succession. The Roman author Suetonius, however, gives several varying accounts from different sources. The first was that Gaius had given Tiberius a slow poison, the second that he was forcibly starved to death, and the third that his ring was removed while he was in a coma, and when he awoke and asked for it, he was smothered with a pillow by Gaius. Of these accounts, only the fourth, an account he ascribes to Seneca, seems to be the truth, that Tiberius removed his ring to hand it to a successor, but acquiesced, putting it back on and clenching his fist over his distaste of Gaius, who was the only option due to Tiberius Gemellus's ineligibility and Claudius's poor mental faculties. After everyone left, he lay motionless for some time, eventually calling for his attendants, who failed to respond. Rising from the bed, Tiberius collapsed to the ground and died on the evening of March 16, 37 CE, having probably suffered a heart attack. The death of Germanicus and nearly 2 decades of treason trials had exacerbated public opinion against Tiberius, with the people of Rome rejoicing at the news of his demise, wanting even to display his naked body upon the Gemoniae. Despite the widespread celebration of his death, Gaius, Macro, and the senators showed reverence to the deceased Tiberius as his body was escorted from Misenum to Rome. There, his will was read before the Senate by Macro, appointing Gaius and Tiberius Gemellus as co-emperors, commending Claudius to the Senate, honouring the Vestals and the Magistri Vicorum, and providing a cash disbursement based on Augustus's will. As had been prearranged, the consuls declared the will null, stating that Tiberius had been of unsound mind, to which the Senate and the mob of rioters that broke into the building enthusiastically agreed. Despite this, much of the will was carried out, and the troops were given their disbursements, depriving only Tiberius Gemellus of his share and of his appointment to the office of Princeps. While the Senate had surprisingly demanded both deification and all of the other post-mortem honours heaped upon Augustus, the new Princeps Gaius denied this request. On April 3, 37 CE, as the mob clamoured for his body to be thrown into the Tiber in disgrace, Gaius read Tiberius's oration before the mausoleum of Augustus in a state funeral, where Tiberius was cremated and interred. Tiberius left a long legacy behind him, reigning for nearly 23 years, his actions drawing the ire of senators and the people alike. Today, Tiberius is remembered as a stern, reclusive tyrant. But was this really the character of the man who lived, or what has come down to us through the biases of contemporary authors? Of course, by modern definitions, he would be harshly judged for his execution of political opponents and reprehensible sexual tendencies. To be clear, the heinous nature of this man is not in question here, but rather the standard characterization of him in modern authorship and public knowledge. It is important to remember that the majority of the treason trials were not carried out by Tiberius at all, but by Sejanus, or the Senate itself. It was only in Tiberius's final years that he began bringing charges against senators himself in any significant capacity. Yet even then, the majority of these sham trials and trumped-up charges were instigated within the senatorial elite and simply signed off on by Tiberius. Before the betrayal of Sejanus, Tiberius's policy towards the Maiestas charges seems to have been based on his expectation that the Senate was capable of handling its own affairs without his intervention. Tiberius was wary of his role in these trials, and treated the early examples of Granius Marcellus and Libo Drusus, as well as Calpurnius Piso, extremely seriously. In all of these cases, Tiberius brought the charges because he had to, not out of any desire to eliminate his rivals, but because the Senate held the Princeps in such high regard. Again, it was only with Sejanus that this pattern broke. Tiberius's supposed neglect may have also been seen in a different light. His 2 retreats, first to Rhodes and then to Capri, were both motivated by dynastic politics. But Tiberius was also a man deeply enraptured by mysticism, astrology, and the occult in his personal life and studies. Likewise, Tiberius's unwillingness to cross the Pomerium into Rome may also stem from these exploits into the occult, as the Pomerium was a religious boundary as much as a political one, due to its association with auspices, fire, and also death and rebirth. Tiberius was obsessed with concepts of fire and reincarnation, studying the concepts of the divine twins, the phoenix, and even Zoroaster's teachings. Crossing the Pomerium may have, in his mind, polluted it with the occult of his studies. Furthermore, the Pomerium, as a political boundary, reflected Tiberius's beliefs regarding the role of the Senate, Augustus's will, and his own imperium. Tiberius arguably did not neglect his duty by refusing to enter Rome, but rather attempted to execute it in accordance with the mos maiorum and the bounds of republican law and tradition. Furthermore, Tiberius saw Augustus's institutions as permanent, and intended not to change them in accordance with Augustus's will, instead trusting them to administer the empire in Augustus's wisdom. In this decision, Tiberius's actions helped cement the Principate bureaucracy, allowing precedent to become an institution and creating a resilience within the administration that would prepare it for challenges yet to come. He, therefore, could trust that Rome and its Senate could administer itself without his need to be present in the city, and his role could be fulfilled through letters and meetings as it could with any other governor holding proconsular imperium. In the end, Tiberius's reverence for the role of the Senate would be replaced with Gaius's disdain for it. Next time we'll explore how Gaius usurped Tiberius's legacy, seizing his authority and then garnering mass appeal from the public as we enter the reign of Caligula. From his troubled upbringing to his accession and reign, we'll explore if he was truly insane or if there really was a capable emperor buried under the tabloid-like tales of his rule. If you don't want to miss that and many other historical videos, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.